Hi, everyone. My name is Vivian Chi. I'm a dermatologist practicing in Little Rock, Arkansas at the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences. I'm so excited that you're joining us today. This session is going to cover nutrition and the part that it plays in your HS with a registered dietitian and nutritionist, Jillian Ondreyka, who also happens to be an HS patient. So Jillian has over 9 years of experience partnering with clients to achieve their nutritional goals. And as a person with HS, she became interested in how food could help and started specializing in nutrition for HS back in 2019. She graduated from the University of Michigan with a Master's of Public Health in the program Health Behavior and Health Education at Eastern Michigan University with her Bachelor's of Science in Dietetics. She also earned the earned the integrative and functional nutritional certified practitioner credential and is a certified LEAP therapist. LEAP stands for Lifestyle and Eating and Performance and is a patient-specific oligo-antigenic diet based on leukocyte activation assay mediator release test. Jillian began practicing in dermatology research and evaluating the effectiveness of lifestyle eating and performance LEAP program in improving outcomes in HS back in 2022. So thank you for joining us tonight, Jillian, and you have the stage.
Thank you, Dr. Shi, for that great introduction, and thanks to the HS Foundation for having me. So my name is Jillian Ondreyka, and I have a private practice called Embrace Health Nutrition. And like Dr. Shi mentioned in the introduction, I do work with people one-on-one to help achieve their health goals. And I have two specialties. The first is nutrition for HS, the reason we're here tonight, and also in women's and child nutrition. And as she mentioned, I did start specializing in HS nutrition because I have it myself. So I believe in lifestyle is medicine, and each of these topics can help you become a healthier version of yourself. So we have healthful nutrition, stress management, sleeps, relationships, and movement. One part of my food philosophy is to think of the whole person and to integrate other practices that can help them on their health journey. There is a dynamic interplay of our genes, what we eat, environment, and lifestyle that can help or harm our health. Thinking of all of these things together is considered lifestyle as medicine. I know some of these topics might not seem very impressive on their own, but trust me, they do have powerful health benefits. So today I'm going to focus on using a food and lifestyle journal to see how various things might affect your HS. I highly recommend keeping a health journal to help you identify your triggers, and I'm going to walk you through a journal template that I created specifically for HS. It's kind of like being a detective to figure out things that might be triggering your HS or things that can help you manage it. So to help you with the journal, I worked with HS Connect to create this template. There's a place to write down the date of your flare, and then try to think back to everything that was happening around that time or right before you had the flare. And you might be able to identify some things that could have triggered it. So this journal is based on a literature review of HS articles on lifestyle and food. And you do have a copy of this on the website for this conference. For lifestyle, we have stress, temperature, sweating, friction, exercise, and hormones. Stress can increase hormones like cortisol, which directly trigger a rise in inflammation. Lifestyle changes are effective in reducing inflammation, such as washing your hands regularly. This can help prevent infections that cause inflammation. Also, we have eating well, exercising, sleeping well, and relieving stress. Some find that warmer temperatures and sweating lead to more flares. And there was actually a study done in Israel that analyzed Facebook posts in an online support group, and they did find a peak in monthly posts in June, July, and August. So this suggested that perhaps HS may be worsened by higher humidity and hot weather. Friction, such as skin rubbing together or against something, is also a factor in HS. This may create tiny tears in the skin and start an inflammation process. So we want to think about reducing friction with our clothing choices and also with sweat-absorbing creams and powders. So you want to wear clothing that is most comfortable for you, and that might depend on the situation and what you are doing. So for exercise, you might want to choose loose-fitting, breathable clothes, or you might want to try tight athletic wear, such as volleyball shorts, to help reduce friction. You also want to think about using moisture-wicking fabric. And for regular wear, you can consider longer shorts like bike shorts for the thigh friction area. And then for women, maybe sports bras or camisoles with built-in bras, and for maybe longer underwear for women as well. And so it's really individualized, and you might have to experiment with different clothes for different activities to figure out what feels the best for you. And for the tight clothing, that might only be comfortable for a short time, so you might want to think about changing after that. Shaving in an area with active lesions may worsen lesions, and some find that shaving may cause a flare, so trimmers tend to be recommended instead. Some women notice that HS flares around their specific times in the menstrual cycle, like ovulation or menstruation. So this is another item that you can track in your journal to help you find patterns in your HS flares. For food, we have dairy, nightshades, brewer's yeast, red and processed meat, and high glycemic foods. All right, so we wanted to start with some nutrition basics. Nutrients are divided into two major categories. We have macronutrients and micronutrients. Protein provides a basic structure for your bones, muscles, and skin, enzymes, and hormones. Many proteins are enzymes that play a role in many chemical reactions in your body. Fat is needed for the synthesis of hormones and other compounds that regulate body processes. And along with storing energy, fats are a component in cell membranes and help regulate temperature. Carbohydrates are a source of energy for the brain and red blood cells, and they play a role in the nervous system, heart, and kidney function. Simple carbohydrates are one or two basic sugars that are linked together, and these are very easily broken down and absorbed quickly into your bloodstream to provide a fast burst of energy. Think of simple carbs as a single bead in a bracelet. It's easy to take off that one bead and digest it. Complex carbs, on the other hand, are long chains of sugars that are connected. The body breaks these down into simple sugars. Complex carbs are like the bracelet on my slide here. The beads need to be taken off the string one by one to be broken down into more manageable pieces to digest. And as you can imagine, that process takes longer. Another concept is the glycemic index. This is used to describe how various carbohydrates affect blood glucose or your blood sugar levels. Because they're easy to digest, simple carbs are more likely to spike your blood sugar quickly, the red line on this graph here, whereas the complex carbs need more time to be taken apart and digested, having less of an immediate impact on your blood sugar, which is the blue line. Choosing complex carbohydrates can help you regulate your blood sugar and reduce high spikes. Another way to help regulate your blood sugar is to always eat carbs with fat and protein. And when eaten together, the blood sugar does not raise as quickly or as high. So this helps to lessen the spikes and dips in your blood sugar. And for micronutrients, we have vitamins, minerals, and water. All right, so I know that was a lot of information on the previous slide. How are we supposed to remember that? So the concepts have been translated into what we call the plate method of balancing macronutrients. The idea with the plate is to aim for eating a meal that has a mixture of your protein, fats, and carbs. And so this is my handout on a low glycemic plate. When you're building your plate, think about half of it to be non-starchy veggies, a quarter of it carbs, and a quarter of it fats and protein. A copy of this is also available on the website. Another blood sugar tip is to go for a walk after eating. Just 2 minutes of walking can lower your blood sugar. It's kind of like magic. And if this is something you can fit into your lifestyle, I highly recommend it. So let's talk about how nutrition might play a role in HS. In research studies and other diseases, there's quite a bit of evidence showing certain foods that can help with inflammation, but we don't really understand how they have those beneficial effects. And we also don't fully understand the connection between nutrition and HS, but the research articles do have various theories. The first is that foods can decrease the production of inflammatory mediators in the body. And the second is that the effects are through the gut-skin immune axis. Foods influence the gut microbiome, and this has an impact on systemic immune responses. I know there's a lot going on this slide. This is a very sciencey slide and the infographic showing the pathways of how the breakdown of foods such as dairy, red meat, and carbohydrates causes follicular inflammation and the nodules that we see. So let's break it down. HS is a chronic relapsing disorder of the defective folliculosebaceous units, and for short we call those FPSUs. These can be blocked, which is called follicular occlusion or blockage, and then that can lead to HS flares. A Western diet is typically high in high glycemic foods, red meat, and dairy, and this raises the insulin and insulin-like growth factor 1 that activates mTOR, promoting growth. And this results in the androgen receptor being stimulated, which can lead to HS nodules. In one study, the more mTOR was turned on or activated, the worse or more severe the HS lesions were. Now let's see what foods have appeared in the HS research articles. Dairy products include casein, whey, natural androgens, and numerous growth factors. These factors may contribute to the mechanisms that cause HS symptoms that we just talked about on the previous slide. Hormones, in particular androgens, are thought to activate HS. Nightshades. These include white potatoes and most potatoes, except for the sweet potatoes and yams. Those are different. Nightshades also include eggplant, tomatoes, goji berries, Cape gooseberries, huckleberries, peppers, and spices, and then the spices made from those peppers, like the cayenne pepper, paprika, chili spices, curry powder, and red pepper. Intestinal permeability is when your gut barrier breaks down and things other than nutrients and water are let into your bloodstream. Nightshades are thought to increase intestinal permeability via components like glycoalkaloid poison, like solanine, alpha-tomatine, and capsaicin. For example, when potatoes are green, that means that they have even higher levels of solanine, so you may have heard before not to eat green potatoes. And about 60% of the solanine is in the potato peel, so depending on how sensitive you are to it, you might be able to peel the potato and not have issues, or if you're really sensitive, that might still cause problems. Another thing is brewer's yeast, and brewers, bakers, and nutritional yeast are all forms of Saccharomyces cerevisiae. This is an ingredient that helps food rise and is found in bread, pizza, cakes, beer, wine, and cheese. Patients with HS who tested as having a wheat intolerance on an IgG test improved when they eliminated brewer's yeast from their diet. And in the diet group, 70% had improved HS. So if they ate the yeast, they found that most of them had a recurrence of HS in less than 1 week. Red and processed meat promotes inflammation in the body. Leucine, an amino acid found in red meat and dairy products, stimulates the insulin and insulin growth factor 1 pathways, which is associated with lesional severity. Red and processed meat include beef, lamb, pork, sausage, bacon, deli meat, and hot dogs. High glycemic foods like white bread, white rice, most crackers, bagels, donuts, breakfast cereals, candy cookies, sugar, etc., things on the slide. These foods can cause blood sugar spikes, which increases insulin that in turn can contribute to HS flares. And high glycemic foods may also contribute to the plugging of those FPSUs that is common in HS. Label reading is another skill that can help you identify triggers. Most ingredients are listed on a food label, but some of them could be under something called natural flavor, which could be anything. Companies are not required to disclose what is actually in that natural flavor, so it's kind of a mystery. And a good rule of thumb is that the shorter the ingredient list, the less processed the food is, and usually it's good if you can recognize the ingredients or be able to pronounce them. You can also do a more in-depth food journal. This is the one that I use when I work with clients. You want to write down everything that you eat or drink, including all of the foods, beverages, supplements, vitamins, etc., from the time you get up, from the time you go to bed. Write down the date and time of when you ate or took the supplement. Be really specific with how much you ate and how it was cooked. And then note all of the symptoms with the time they started and then also the time that they resolved. And then, of course, you can add in other things if you want to, such as the mood or the hormones, if you want to add those items for tracking. And if you're more of a tech person and you want to use an app, I do recommend this app. It's called My Symptoms Food Diary. It's about $6. So here are some tips on interpreting your journals once you start doing them. Most symptoms occur within 48 hours, but can be up to 72 hours from eating a food. So you want to look for trends. For example, do you notice every time you eat donuts, you have an increase in pain and drainage? That'd be something to note. And if you are doing an elimination diet, at some point you do start introducing foods back in and then watch for symptoms. And you can introduce one new food a day or every 3 days. And every 3 days would be kind of the more conservative approach if you wanted to do that. And then if you have symptoms with that food, you can keep it out and try it again later to see if you have symptoms the next time you introduce it. And then once you have identified foods that do cause symptoms, you can decide to keep those offending foods out long term, or you can choose to enjoy them in small amounts if you want to. So I know I didn't have time to discuss everything that's on this slide or elimination diet, so I wanted to point out one of the free webinars I have on my website. And there's also an article I wrote for HS Connect that's hyperlinked here. And you do get a copy of the slides on the website as well. So I'm going to end with summarizing the tips for each topic. We'll start with nutrition considerations, and I'll share a few more topics that have been studied in HS. As I mentioned earlier, a high glycemic diet is thought to activate HS. And on the other hand, eating to control your blood sugar can improve your health. A low glycemic diet is high in fruits, vegetables, fish, and low in carbohydrates. And this eating pattern helps lower blood sugar levels, weight loss, and lowers the risk of heart disease and type 2 diabetes. We have several studies on vitamin D and HS. HS has been associated with a major vitamin D deficiency. This is defined as less than 30 nanograms per milliliter. And across these studies, many people with HS were vitamin D deficient. And when they were given vitamin D supplementation, their HS nodules significantly decreased, and they experienced a decrease in their HS severity. You can get vitamin D through sun exposure and also through foods. And so here are the foods that you can focus on. We have salmon, tuna, egg, and dairy. As you can see, that list is very short, especially if we are cutting out dairy. So for most people, it is hard to get enough through the sun and food alone. And in those cases, the supplements can help meet the need. And I just want to note that supplements can interact with medications and foods, so it's always a good thing to check with your doctor. Similar to vitamin D, lower levels of zinc have been associated with more severe disease. Zinc is anti-inflammatory and also anti-androgenic, and androgens are a type of hormone. In one study, taking 90 milligrams of zinc gluconate helped people with HS achieve remission. Food sources of zinc include beef, pork chop, beans, chicken, and pumpkin seeds. And in general, sometimes supplementing with minerals can cause GI upset. And this can get better if you take the supplement with food and start with a low dose so your body can adjust. It's also better to buy supplements in a form that is best absorbed, like zinc picolinate. Taking zinc supplements long-term can actually cause a copper deficiency, so it's best to take a zinc supplement that has some copper in it. And the ratio you want to look for is about 50 milligrams of zinc to 1 milligram of copper. And again, supplements can interact with food and medication, so always check with your doctor or pharmacist. A Mediterranean diet has been recommended for HS. Most people have probably heard of this diet before. It's talked about a lot in media. There's a lot of studies about it. And the foundation of this diet includes veggies, fruits, herbs, nuts, beans, and whole grains. This diet is high in antioxidants and polyphenols. Plant-based diets like this increase gut microbiome diversity, which modulates the inflammatory response. A Mediterranean diet is thought to decrease HS severity through its anti-inflammatory effects. Fasting is another hot topic. Fasting does allow the gut time to clean itself with intestinal waves, and the gut can rest if it's not always working to digest foods. If you want to try fasting, I would recommend a prolonged nightly fast, which is a type of intermittent fast. This may improve gut barrier function, reduce inflammation, and increase bacterial diversity. And you can aim for 12 hours between your last meal and breakfast. The night fasting is a little bit better, in my opinion, because of the research I've seen with circadian rhythms. Fasting can have better results if you do it at night versus during the day. And we do have a study that looked at fasting during Ramadan in HS patients, and they found a decrease in HS severity during that time. I also have a note to keep in mind that fasting is not advised during pregnancy and other medical conditions, so always check with your doctor to make sure that you can fast safely. This was a study that I did last year with Dr. Serezny and Dr. Hamzavi at Henry Ford Health. We did a prospective pilot study using the LEAP program as the intervention. And this is a personalized anti-inflammatory eating program based on the results of the mediator release test, a type of food sensitivity test. And our results were that there were a significant decrease in HS-specific quality of life, which I know sounds confusing, but this means how much HS affected their life decreased. So that's a good thing. And with this, we suggest that patients with HS may benefit from the LEAP program. So keep an eye out for our paper once we finish writing it and we publish. This is a summary slide I have for foods that you can eat to potentially help your HS. I'm not going to go through everything, and you do have a copy of these slides, so you can review this later. And these foods may or may not cause symptoms in your body, so it's best to use a food symptom journal to identify your personal food triggers. In the interest of time, I won't go over each of these, but here are some tips to try for stress management and for sleep, and also relationships and movement. And I wanted to wrap up by saying I see managing HS as a puzzle, and there are different pieces that might help you. So for example, using the medications or topicals that your doctor prescribes, managing stress, having an HS surgery, reducing friction, identifying your food triggers, all of these things come together to reduce inflammation and your HS flares. So by trying out different therapies, you'll hopefully be able to see what works for you and what you want to put into your HS care plan. And what comprises your care plan or puzzle might be different for everyone and from person to person. So don't forget about your free handouts that you have on the website. And if you want to know more, one of the services I offer is my HS course. I do offer this virtually worldwide. And there are some more free webinars on my website. If we don't get to your questions today, feel free to post them in the discussion board. You can also email me with questions. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and I'm happy to take your questions now.
Wow. Welcome back. Well, this is a great talk. I really thank you, Jillian. This is a wealth of information. I learn so much every time I hear you talk. So we're going to have some questions from the audience, but I'm going to kind of, ask you a question that I get a lot from my own patients. We always have these recommendations to eating healthy and being healthy. But I find that sometimes, myself included, it is a little bit time consuming and could potentially be expensive to choose the correct diet for your disease, right? What are your general tips in how to overcome the time practicality and the economic practicality of eating healthy and eating right?
Yeah, those are definitely valid concerns. So the first thing with the time component, you can kind of reframe it as the time that you're spending is an investment in your health and well-being. So, and you can decide like how much you want to cook at home versus how much you want to eat out, and make some goals there. And then that might kind of make this time go by faster or feel like more worthwhile since you are doing it for a reason. And as far as the expense, yes, it could be more expensive, but there are also like plant-based proteins you could focus on to add into your meal plans that would be much cheaper. So if you focus on like beans, and even peanut butter, if you look at the cost per serving, they're just like 15 cents for the beans. I'm not sure how much for the peanut butter, but they're not very much compared to like if you eat chicken every day or someone like the meat every day. And those food sources also provide a lot of fiber, so it's good to kind of mix those in as well with the meat sources of protein. And then shopping, just some tips like buying in bulk, shopping the ads, and when foods are in season, they tend to be cheaper. And then taking advantage of the frozen foods because those are just as nutritious as the fresh ones and they last longer. So yeah, those are some of the tips that I have.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you. Now I'm going to actually go into some of the questions that came from the audience on the question board. There's a couple of attendees that asked about brewer's yeast. Which of the products besides the ones you've mentioned on a daily basis tend to be brewer's yeast heavy or when they're present? And are they present in all wines and beers?
That's a good question. And I don't know all the answers to that because how foods are processed is very complicated and it's like different for each one. So I think that yes, it is going to be in all of the wine and the fermented foods because I'm pretty sure they use it in the fermentation process. And then yeast could be in a lot of different things. I do actually have a handout on this. I'd have to look back on it to refresh my memory, but there's a lot of like sauces that you'd want to watch out for. That could have it, and along with most things that like the bread, things that are rising like that, like the yeast is usually the ingredient that makes it rise. So like all the bakery goods, and I can't think of other examples, but those are the main things that I'm aware of.
All right, so like avoid having a beer or wine at the same time as your favorite pastry and baked goods. Okay, that's really helpful. So, one of the questions that came from the audience from Anna is about ancestry, whether certain your genetic background, your ancestry play a role in certain food triggers. And the actual question is she's been trying to return to her dietary norm of the New World ancestor. So, no red meat, dairy, refined sugar, or gluten, but it's heavy on nightshades potentially. So, how does that play into the limiting nightshades diet that you mentioned?
So I'm not sure about the ancestry part, but as far as the nightshades, everyone's different. So you might not have any reactions to nightshades. So that's why I really believe in the food journal approach and the food symptom detail, because then you'll really be able to see, like, if every time you have potatoes, do you flare? Then that's kind of an easy one to figure out. But you could be totally fine when it comes to the nightshades, and that might not cause symptoms in your body. So in my practice, when I do the MRT, the food sensitivity test, everyone's results, and they have all been people with HS, are a little bit different. There's not one food that we're all reactive to. Kind of unfortunately, right? Because that'd make it easy, but that's not the case. We are all individuals, and we have our personal experiences and health conditions. So you might not be reactive to nightshades. So that's why I like to use the food journal approach, because that way you're not eliminating too many things without a good reason. So if you use the journal, you're really using the scientific method as far as like trying it out and seeing what happens. So if you try it and you have symptoms every time you try it, then that's a good indicator that that food might be a trigger, and let's limit how much we eat it. But if you're eating it and not having any problems, then there's probably no reason to take it out of your diet.
Cool, thank you. And I guess that's a really good question that Anna asked. It's one trigger may not be the same for another trigger. That goes to the forefront of research in nutrition and genetics, right? Nutrigenomics and nutrigenetics. We may all have the same letters in our DNA, but the gene expression and our environment really influence how we react to certain foods that we eat, and perhaps
Mm-hmm.
certain foods that we eat also changes how our genes are expressed. So that is the beauty of science and practice. Okay, I love this. So
Yes.
another question here is on do you know of any research on being a vegan or vegan practice and HS?
Nope, I haven't seen any studies specifically on that.
Yeah, I haven't either. The closest is survey studies that vegetables and produce tend to be reported as, improving foods,
Mm-hmm.
but not specifically in vegans. But maybe that should be something on the to-do list for us nerds moving forward. I mean, I agree with it's
Yes.
just, I feel like you and I talked about this before when we are at conferences. It's so hard to do diet and nutrition studies, the
Mm-hmm.
compliance and the variety. And we live in a world of culinary, practices, right? So we're not just eating chicken breasts by itself, but all the seasonings and the fun things that we do with our food and ingredients really defines our culinary culture, and that sometimes is really hard to control too.
Yeah, and all the other factors that could be influencing HS, like I talked about tonight with the lifestyle. If you have any of those things going on, like during the study, like if you're also really stressed, like that could be a trigger for HS. So there's so many like confounding variables that it does make it hard to isolate just nutrition.
Absolutely. And, we are at the juncture. I'm looking at us two on the screen now. It's really the person writing the prescription working closely with someone who's making the dietary recommendations. And I wish that we have more of these interdisciplinary care that we see across more of the country. I would say, in general, Jillian, I wanted to pick your brain on what are some things that you wanted to definitely avoid telling your clients to avoid when they come in, say, I really want a dietary plan that's going to cure my HS, or what is the one thing I can do to HS? Can
Mm-hmm.
I stop my medicine eventually if I follow this, really cool anti-inflammatory that's identified just for my condition?
Right. Yeah. Like I talked about in my summary, I had that slide with the puzzle pieces. That analogy really resonates with me. Hopefully, you guys like it too. And I think nutrition is one piece of the puzzle, but I think it is important to have the other pieces as well. So, working closely with their dermatologist, I like the interdisciplinary aspect as well, and making sure that everything's fine-tuned with all of those areas and all of your different treatment options. I feel like there were so many things that you were talking about just now that I wanted to pick up on, but I can't remember what they were. That's the first one.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I think you're right that we definitely want this to be kind of a treatment toolbox. I say this a lot that,
Mhm.
nutrition is one part of the puzzle, right? Lifestyle modifications, the other type of puzzle, and medications, the other part. So it's like a football team that all the players work synergistically to potentiate each other. So we really appreciate this cross pollination and collaboration to give our patients and clients the best outcome in their HS and health.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Let me just kind of see if there are anything else that are coming through. Wow. Okay. So one of the audience read an article on Ramadan fasting, which was daytime fasting. From what I understand,
Mhm.
you mentioned about nighttime fasting is better. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so there were some studies done. I actually was watching videos by and now of course the name escapes me, but it's nutritionfacts.org, Dr. Greger, I think. He does have a series of videos on fasting, and what he does, if you're not familiar with his work, is he reads research studies and kind of makes videos about explaining them to the public, so they're really useful. And he was sharing different studies that showed like the differences between fasting during the day and fasting during the night. And basically his summary was that if you do it during the night, it's better. And it might be because of our natural circadian rhythms of when, being awake. Circadian rhythm is like we awake in sleep cycle. So that was how I kind of formed my opinion, is looking at those videos and looking at some of the studies myself. So it was evaluating a few different studies, and across the board, there did seem to be a little more benefit for the nighttime. However, I'm not against the other types of fasting. If you want to do it during the day or whatever kind of time frame you want. Intermittent fasting has a lot of different like algorithms for when you want to eat or not eat, and I don't work a lot with fasting, to be honest, but I'm aware of what's out there. So there's windows where you will eat and windows where you won't eat, and it's different. I would just, like I said in the talk, highly suggest talking to your doctor about it, because there are conditions where fasting might not be a good idea, and I would just want to make sure that everyone is safe and would talk to their doctor first.
Right, absolutely. Thank you. And it probably goes to remind myself to not stack so much in after at night after everyone goes to sleep, since fasting at night is a little bit better. But the work that you mentioned with chronotherapy talks a lot, it's a lot widely talked about in integrative medicine in general, where chronotherapy, right, how we give therapy with time and how that matches to circadian rhythm to have maximum effect and least side effects. So this is actually also another forefront of research. Okay, so we have time for one more question. This is something that I guess I asked a lot about too. So if we're going to try to cut dairy out for the benefit of inflammatory disorders like HS, how else can I get my calcium?
So for calcium, I would say green leafy vegetables are a good replacement. And on the topic, I do really like plant-based proteins, and one of them that I like is from peas. So that's a good replacement. You can look for different brands. And when you're looking at those kind of milks, I would also just encourage you to look at the protein content, because a lot of them don't have a lot of protein, so they're not exactly the best replacement for cow's milk. But the pea-based plant milk usually does have more protein, so I like to use that one.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you very much. All right, I wish we have time to pick your brain some more tonight, and it's time for us to kind of move into the next session. So if you have any additional questions, please feel free to contact Jillian or myself on the platform. So right now, let us take a one last 10-minute break before heading to our last session in the evening with Dr. John Frew from Australia. Thank you all. Have a good
Thank you.
evening. See you soon.